We welcome all our viewers on Araz News English, where we share with you latest analysis about South Azerbaijan. Is pressure and injustice of Iran against national activities at a new stage? In recent weeks, human rights news spread from South Azerbaijan is extremely worrying and sad. All signs show a significant increase in oppression and injustice of the fascist and racist Iranian state against the South Azerbaijani national civil activities. These repressions, whether in terms of violence or breadth, are so prominent that according to many South Azerbaijani political and human rights activists, the repressions against South Azerbaijan has entered a new phase. The South Azerbaijani Turkish nation, which has been struggling to dominate its destiny for 115 years since the constitutional revolution, is not unfamiliar with the oppression and injustice applied and has been subjected to incredible persecution from time to time. All the torment we suffered during the constitutionalist revolution and heavy cost we paid, the suppression of the Hiyabani operation with blood, the murder of tens of thousands of our kinsmen by Persian fascism in 1946, and after the 1979 revolution, the wiping out of our people, all the cruelty and injustice shown to the Azerbaijani people and the leaders of the operations, and all the blood shed have not been erased from the memory of our nation. In the last 30 years, when the modern face of South Azerbaijan national movement emerged, the injustice of the Iranian state against activists increased as the width and the depth of operation grew. Even from the first operation to dominate the destiny of South Azerbaijani Turks, right after the Islamic Revolution, our activists were subjected to imprisonment and suspicious death. Undoubtedly, one of the most important factors in this matter is Professor Zehtabi's case, the founding father and one of the cornerstones of the modern phase of our movement. Professor Zehtabi, who was subjected to prison, repeated restraints and tortures by the Iranian state, was eventually murdered in 1998 in suspicious way. Although the form and time of the massacre and the traces of the torture of the professor's body prove that the murder was deliberate and planned in advance, the Iranian state has prevented the full investigation of the murder up to this day. However, many people regard the murder of Professor Zehtabi as a link from the serial murders carried out by the intelligence services of Iran in those years. As a part of this serial murder project, the Iranian state massacred many intellectuals just because they were opposed to injustices of the regime. Unfortunately, as with other issues, the Persian media boycotted South Azerbaijan. There is no doubt that Professor Zehtabi is one of the first martyrs of the modern phase of South Azerbaijani national movement. Likewise, the death of the engineer Ghulam Reza Amani is also in a category of suspicious death, and he is one of the martyrs of the national movement. Of course, suspicious deaths were not limited to Professor Zehtabi and engineer Amani, and suspicions about the death of Cengiz Bahtaver, Sehert Afshari and Hassan Demirci were not resolved. The severe punishments and long imprisonment imposed on our Dr. Latif Hassani, Said Matinpur and many other national activists are also within the scope of this systematic pressure and injustice. However, with the expansion of the sphere of influence of our national movement in recent months, the pressure and injustice of Iranian state on our activists has increased. Of course, the economic and political crisis faced by the Iranian state and the development in the Middle East led to the deepening of the pressures and injustices applied as well. The Iranian regime wants to eliminate any group or thought symbol that the nations living in Iran can trust, so that there is no alternative to it but the regime itself. In recent months, Abbas Lisani, Ali Reza Farshi, Hamid Manafi, Behnam Sheikhi, Tohid Amir Amini, Kianush Aslani, Yusuf Kari, Akber Muhajir, and many others have been condemned to long-term imprisonment, especially in cases where coronavirus has spread widely in the country and many of the prisoners have been released from the prison. For this reason, it is definitely an element of oppression and unfairness to refrain from even the destructive emancipation of Azerbaijani national civil prisoners. Of course, this subject in the category of the physical and psychological torture. However, many of our activists have been detained and are waiting for court decisions in prison. The Iranian regime even keeps them in prison during the pandemic. To put it briefly, the Iranian state holds dozens of South Azerbaijani national activists in prisons unfairly and even against its own law. In addition, according to the information obtained from the multiple sources within the country in recent weeks, intelligence forces of the Iranian regime questioned and threatened in different ways a large number of South Azerbaijani activists in Tabriz, Urmia, Erdebil, Zanjan, Kazvin, and Tehran. However, the news of these interrogations and threats did not spread in the media by the means of securing our people. In particular, this pressure and threats were applied at a wider level in Tabriz. More important and saddening than all of this is that 2 more people have been added to the number of suspicious deaths of our activists in recent weeks. One of them is national activist Ali Mehmedzadeh, who was living in Tabriz. He died in a traffic accident a few weeks ago and his wife was seriously injured. Likewise, national activist from Binab, Bahman Haliki, lost his life in a traffic accident. Both of our activists' death caused suspicions because they were among the well-known and effective activists of their cities, and both of them lost their lives due to similar traffic accident. According to the information received, both cars of the national activists went out of control when was moving on road. The timing and form of these traffic accidents are non-verbally meaningful, and there is a strong possibility that the mechanical system of the cars were deliberately broken in both accidents. In particular, according to the relatives, both activists who lost their lives were physically and psychologically healthy enough to not lose control of the car. In any case, all the evidence shows that the new conditions of South Azerbaijan, Iran and the Middle East have made the Iranian state more aggressive and cruel. Of course, as in the past, such oppression and injustice will not be able to turn our nation away from its just struggle, and the South Azerbaijan Turkish nation will continue its struggle for salvation. Only our organizations and our national activists should be extremely careful in their activities and take all precautionary measures. On the other hand, international human rights institutions and states are expected to oppose the Iranian regime's attitudes that violate minorities and human rights. In this way, the states or institutions that support the Islamic Republic of Iran will look questionable in the historical memory of the nations living in Iran. In the past days, Cooperation Platform of South Azerbaijan political organizations issued a declaration of increasing pressure against the national activists, informing the Turkish nation of South Azerbaijan and the world public opinion, and warning the Iranian state about the consequences and the future of oppression, cruelty and injustice it imposed. Finally, it should be emphasized that the Persian media continue their anti-Azerbaijani attitude as in the past. Not only they boycott South Azerbaijan's human rights news, but perhaps continue their broadcast against Azerbaijan and Turkic nations. Of course, this issue does not go unnoticed by the South Azerbaijan Turkish nation, and our nation will determine its own attitude on this basis. It was analysis about South Azerbaijan for this week. See you next time on Araz News English.